Hashem, we're on the bottom of 115b, Kuf Tezvav, on base. Today's daf is Kuf Tezayin, 116. So we'll start on 115b, 3 lines from the bottom. The Gemara cited the Brisa said, Hakol Ksher and Lahakriv, that you can bring all of the animals that were kosher, you're allowed to bring them as a carbon. Before the Mishkan was built. So the Gemara says, Minani Mili, what's the source for this? So Amar Avhuna, Rav Huna says the Amar Kra, it's based upon the verse, Vayiven Noach Mizbeach Hashem. Noach built an altar to God. Vayikach Mikol Behema Torah, and he took from all the kosher animals, from all the behemas that were kosher, Kol Ofa Tahor. And behema, when it says behema, Kamash Ma'o, Chaya B'chal Behema. It includes not only the domesticated animals of the sheep, the goat, and the bull, but also the wild animals like the deer and the gazelle. And Rashi says we know that because right next to her it says this is the animal that you could eat, and right next to it is the ayil, the tzvi, and the achmar. And then we continue on 116a, Zachar Munakevos, and before the Mishkan was built, they could bring male animals and female animals, pure animals and animals that had a blemish. We skipped the parentheses. They weren't allowed to bring an animal that was missing a limb. And one of the 7 Noahide laws is that you can't rip the limb off of a living animal and eat it. But in addition to that, there's another law, but it's not one of the 7 Noahides that a Noahide could not bring an animal that was missing a limb. Amar Rebbe Lazar Minayel Mechusar Aver Shenasar of Noach. How do we know the animal that's missing a limb is disqualified for a Noahide? Says the verse Mikol Achai Mikol Basar. So it says, from every living animal, from every flesh. Amra Torah Ve Behema Shachayin Rosh Evaron Shalah. Torah is telling us with this, you should bring an animal whose limbs are intact. Vidilma Lamute Treifa, maybe that verse that says Mikol Achai comes to exclude a treifa. A treifa, typically speaking throughout the Shas, is an animal with a mortal wound, which elsewhere is defined as an animal that can't survive the year. So maybe that's what Noach was being told to bring, that he's being told to bring animals, but not a treifa animal onto the ark. So the Gemara says, no, we don't need that. Why? Because we know that a treifa couldn't be brought onto the ark, because it says in the verse, Milachayot zera. It says you should bring these animals in lachayot zera. So therefore, since the purpose of it was to reproduce, a treifa couldn't reproduce. So the Gemara says, well, that's not universally accepted. That only works according to the position that a treifa cannot give birth, but that it's not universally accepted. But according to the one who says that a treifa is capable of being birthed, so a chayot zera is not excluding a treifa. So therefore, Michael and Meimar. So how do we know? So it's based upon the fact that the pasuk says, "Amar Hakra itach," bring these animals tavimi al chayos itach, to live with you. So that's teaching us bedom minlach. And the animals have to be like you, and just like you're not a treifa, the animal shouldn't be a treifa. The Gemara says, well, how do we know that? Good morning, Jeff. We're on 116a, around 10 lines on the top. The Gemara says, "V'dilma Noach gufei treifa." How do we know Noach was not a treifa? The Gemara says he wasn't. The pasuk says tamim ksivbe. It says he was tamim. The Gemara says, yeah, but maybe that means v'dilma tamim bedrachav. But maybe that just means he was not in good physical health. Maybe it just means his ways were pure. The Gemara says no, tzaddik sivbeig. No, because it says also calls him righteous. But delma tam bedrachav tzaddik v'matzav. Maybe there's 2 different types of being a tzaddik. One is Rashi says tam bedrachav. Maybe it means he was humble. And tzaddik matzav means maybe he had good deeds. The Gemara says no. Isav bedaitach the noch gufei treifa. You want to say that Noach was a treifa? Mi karmoel Noach, the kavasach ayel shleimim mot ayel. It does really make sense that God was telling Noach, bring up only like you, but don't bring animals that are healthy. That wouldn't make sense. So if that's the case, me'achar denafkawan me'itach. So since we learn out that the animal can't be a treifa from the words itach, well, if that's the case, the chayot zera lamoli. So why does it need to say in order to reproduce? We know that it's a trait that needs to be like you. So why does it need to say l'chayot itach? So the Gemara says, l'chayot zera, why does it need to say that? So the Gemara says, you might have thought itach l'tzabta ba'alma. You might have thought that when it says this pasuk of itach, that might have thought that you bring the animals in just for companionship. So, and afil zakin, afil saris, you can even bring an older animal, your old animal, or an animal that was neutered. Kamashwa, no, the animals have to be capable of, the animals they brought into the ark have to be capable of reproducing so that we could have more animals in the world. Okay, so now we're up to the next line in the Bryce. So it said that before the Mishkan was built, you could bring tahor animals, but not tummy animals. And here tahor means kosher and not non-kosher. So the Gemara says, but wait, this was before the Mishkan was built, before even at the time of the flood. There were no kosher and non-kosher animals during the time of the flood. So I remember Shmuel Bar Nachmani, I remember Yonasan, Me'osan. So there's different girsas here, there's different actual texts. So Me'osan, so we'll adopt the girsa of the Marsha, which means who says Me'osan Shatidon L'Tayr. Yeah, he meant brings the ones that in the future will be the kosher animals. Well, how's he going to know? How did Noach know this? Now Rashi on the Torah here says it proves that Noach learned Torah. That's what Rashi in his commentary to the Torah says. But here the Gemara gives a different answer. He brought them to the ark. Whatever the ark absorbed, that proves that he was a kosher animal. Meaning to say, he could tell by the basis the ark helped him out. The ark helped him out. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Avo Amar Kra, meaning to say, because the animal, some commentators explain it, the animal could have had a treifa, so the ark wouldn't have absorbed it if it wasn't kosher. And Rabbi Avo says, Amar Kra, the animals came on their own, and that's how we knew which was kosher. And the kosher animals came 7, and the non-kosher animals came 2 at a time. So that's how we knew that it was kosher. So now we learned in this brayso, Amar Marva, Kol Karvu Olos, that every carbon that was brought before the Mishkan was built was just brought as an olah. No other types of sacrifices. And olah is totally burnt. It says in Gemara, olah sin shlamim, you mean to say they didn't bring a shlamim? It says at Mount Sinai that they gathered together and they brought these Zevachim shlamim Hashem. They brought carbon shlamim at the foot of Mount Sinai. So read it, Hakol Karvu Olos Ushlamim. So okay, change the text. They brought olos and shlamim. Gemara says it can't be. But telling you have a different price. It says over shlamim lo, that they did not bring shlamim before the Mishkan was built. Kiyam olos and shlamim lo. Gemara says okay. Command Amar lo cover shlamim. B'nei Noach. Okay, so there's that price is like the position that the Noahides did not bring shlamim. Didn't my Rabbi Yosef Chanina Amar karvu shlamim b'nei Noach. Chad Amar lo karvu. So it's a dispute whether or not the Noahides are allowed to bring the carbon shlamim, which is the olah is entirely burnt, and the shlamim, some goes to burnt, some goes to the kohen, and some goes to the owner. So my time of demand amar carbon shlamim b'nei Noach. What's the basis for the idea that the Noahides brought shlamim? Well, it comes actually from somebody even before Noach. Because Hevel also brought from the first of his flock and also from their fat. What's an example of a carbon where only the fats are brought, but the entire animal is not brought? That's the example of the shlamim. So therefore, Hevel brought a carbon shlamim. My time of the mandamar will care. But what's the source of the idea that the Noahides did not bring a shlamim? Because it says Uri tzafon uvoi teiman. So that's what the pasuk says. The pasuk says Uri tzafon, which means awaken in the north and come to the south. And the Chachamim understand that pasuk to mean tisnaer uma shema betzafon. Awaken this nation or stir up this nation whose actions are in the north, i.e. the northern part of the courtyard, because they just can bring an olah. But hold on one second. Right. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Okay, so the okay, so the hold on. Okay, so the Tisner Uma Shemasa B'Tzafon V'Tava Uma Shemasa B'Tzafon B'Darom. Meaning to say, let's stir up the nation, the nations of the world. They can only serve the sacrifices in the north, in the because they can only bring an oah, and come forward the nation whose actions are in the south and the north, and that's the Bnei Israel will take over the world because they bring in the north and the south. They bring the Shlamim. So what about the other opinion? So what about the first approach? It says that they brought the Shlamim Mechal Be'en. They said no, that just means Misham Nehen Didau. He brought it from the best of his flock. Umaranami Aksiv Uri Tzafon. No, that doesn't refer to the nations. So that verse just means that there'll be the ingathering of the exiles. Or says Vaksiv. What are you talking about when it says Moshe Gamata Titem Biadenu Zvachim Ve'olos Vasino Hashem Elokeinu? Moshe says to Pharaoh, "You're going to give us Zvachim Ve'olos." Zvachim usually means Shlamim and Olos, and we'll bring an offering to God. No, the Gemara says Zvachim there doesn't mean shlamim. Zvachim la'achila v'olos la'krav. Just Zvachim means that they wanted a steak, or a hamburger, not a korban shlamim, and olos would be brought. Gemara says v'alksev v'yikach Yisrael chosim Moshe olos zvachim. Yisrael brought ola uzvachim, so he brought shlamim. So Gemara says no, ahu, and there it says that he brought it as an offering. V'yikach Yisrael chosim Moshe. It says specifically brought it to God. So the Gemara says, no, by Yisro, so you might have thought Yisro was before Matan Torah, before the beginning of the Torah, because it's written in the Torah. And then following after the passage of Yisro coming and bringing this offering is the giving of the Torah. But still the Gemara says, the passage of Yisro is written after, actually, ironically, it's after the giving of the Torah. So as we'll get into. Gemara says, but this is only according to the opinion that says that Yisro was after the giving of Torah. But according to the one who says Yisro actually came, the way it's written in the Torah, prior to the giving of the Torah, it says he brought a shlamim. We learned that this is a dispute. So it's a dispute. Was Yisro prior to or after the giving of the Torah? So how does the one who says Yisro is before Matan Torah? It seems he brought a shlamim. The Gemara says, well, Yisro called him Matan Torah. So you have to just line up the positions. The one who says Yisro came before Matan Torah also says that the Noahides could bring a shlamim. And Gemara now says Kitanai. This is a question: when did Yisro come? Is a dispute amongst the Tanaim. And it says Vayishmo Yisro Kohen Midjan. Yisro, the Kohen of Midjan, heard and he heard and he came. So what did he hear that made him want to come and go to the Jewish people? Mashmu Shema. What did he hear? What did Yisro hear that he wanted to convert? So Rabbi Yeshua says, Mechamas Amalek, he heard the war with Amalek. Shama Sharek Siv Betzido, because right before in the Torah it's Vayacholosh Yeshua Amalek Amalek Ficharav. Yeshua weakened Amalek and his people according to the sword. Rabbi Lazar Amodai Omer Matan Torah Shema. So according to the first approach, he came before the giving of the Torah. But according to this approach, he came after the giving of the Torah because he heard about the giving of the Torah. Matan Torah Shema Ba. Kishenitna Torah Israel, because he heard the giving of the Torah. Because what happened was when the Torah was given to the Jewish people, The sound of the Matan Torah was going from one end of the world to the other. And all the kings of the idolaters started to tremble in their palaces. V'amru shira, they were singing praises, as it says, Uvehechalo kulo omer kavod. Nitkabtu kulam etzel Bilam harasha. So they all went to Bilam, the wicked one. V'amru ma kol ha'amon asher shamanu. What's the sound that we're hearing? Shema mabul balom. Is there a flood coming to the world? So Bilam responded, Hashem lemabul Hashem lemabul yashav. Hashem, basically, even though it says lemabul yashav, we understood that means that God took an oath that he wasn't, from the word shvuah, that God took an oath he wasn't going to destroy the world with a flood. So he says, Bilam says to them, God took an oath that he was not going to bring a flood upon the world. You might bring a flood of fire. So it says God will judge through fire. So he said he already took an oath that he's not going to destroy all the flesh. So they said, well, what do we hear? The God has a treasure in his treasury. He has this treasury in his that he saved 974 generations before the world was created. And he won, and now he's giving it to his children, as it says, Hashem oz amoyitain. Hashem will give strength to his people. Miyad paslu kulam v'amru Hashem yivarechas amo v'shalom. I just want to stop. So for a second, I heard from in the name of Rabbi Meir Shapiro, who came up with this beautiful concept of doing the Daf Yomi, and he explained this. He says, why did the nations of the world think that there was a flood? Because, so Meir Shapiro says that the nations of the world saw that everybody was together, and there was like this unity, this trembling in the world. They said, oh, what brings everybody together? A crisis, distress, this flood. And so that's what they assumed, that there must have been a flood. But Bilam said, no, there's another way everybody could get together. The other way everybody could get together is with this just common sense of deep spiritual connection to Hashem. We don't have that, but that's what the Matan Torah is. That's what Bilam said. So they said it's not a mabul, it's this deep connection to Hashem. And Meir Shapiro founded the Daf Yomi, so people, no matter where you are in the world, if you're part of the Jewish community doing the Daf, you're connected. You meet a guy in China, he's doing the Daf, and you're doing the Daf, you're on the same page, you're studying the same things, so we're connected by this higher level of connection. So anyway, we've seen Yisro said, we said, what did Yisro hear? That he came, either he heard about Amalek or he heard about the giving of the Torah. So Rabbi Eliezer says, he heard about the splitting of the sea, as it says, so when all the kings of the Amorites heard this, and also Rachav the Zona, Amro, Shulcha Yoshua, also Rachav heard about it. The whole world heard about it. As it says, that Rachav the harlot, she said to the messengers of Joshua, we heard which God dried out the Yamsuf. How come in one place it says, in one verse it says that after they heard about the Malchei Amori, it says after they heard all this, it says they didn't have any spirit. But by Rachav it says, it says there is no more spirit in the man. So why in one place it say there's no more spirit, but in one say there's no more spirit in the man? So the Gemara says it's to teach us that that on top of 116b, that after they heard about the Kriyas Yamsuf, they weren't even able to consummate their sexual relationships. Mana Yadun, how did Racham know this? Well, we know she knew it because there was no. She was busy with every diplomat, every bureaucrat, every minister. She was 10 years old when the Bnei Israel left Egypt. and she was a harlot for 40 years. She was a harlot for all 40 years that the Jewish people were in the wilderness. Achar nun shana, after 50 years, Niskaira, she converted. After she was 50 years old. Amra Yehi Malchali Beschar, Chavel Chalonu Pishtim. She said to Hashem, forgive me in the reward for the Chavel, the rope, the Chalon, the window with the Pishtim. And so what Rashi explains, what happened was she used to bring her customers in through the window, through the rope, and hide them under the linen. And that she did tshuva because she brought in the messengers of Joshua. She let them out down the window with the rope, and she also hid them in the pishtei eitz. Okay, Amar Mar of the Chachamim is manazever shayla so Cain. So nowadays the idolaters are allowed. We learned in the Mishnah they're allowed to bring, even nowadays they're allowed to bring an offering on a bama. Menon Emilia. What's the source? The Tanur Rabbanan. Daber Bnei Israel. Speak to the children of Israel and tell them not to do a sacrifice outside of the temple, which means to say Bnei Israel mitzuvin al shchut echutz. Mitzuvin al shchut echutz. Only the Bnei Israel are commanded, but not the idolaters. Therefore, each one builds. Each idolater can build a private altar for himself. He can bring whatever he wants. Not whatever he wants. He can only bring an or maybe a shlamim according to other opinions. Even though they're allowed to do it, you're not allowed to help them. You can't be their agent. But you could teach them how to do it. Good morning. We'll study in the memory of Rav Shammai. What was his full Hebrew name? Do you remember? Your father's full Hebrew name? It'll come to you. Rav Shammai ben David Kalman, the Shammai should have an aliyah. He would have liked this Gemara. So that Rab, a great man, I had the opportunity to meet him a few times. He left a big impression on me. So he says, you're allowed to teach them, like, Ifra Hormiza, Ema de Shabar Malka. She was the mother of King Shabur. That Shadra Korban Rava. She sent an offering to Rava. She said, Shachle, she sent to him, Askuani L'Shem Shemayim, bring me up this carbon for heaven. There's no longer a base of Mikdash. So he couldn't do it. So Amar Lahu Rav Safo, Rav Acha Bar Huna, Zilu V'Dabru, Trei Omegulai. Go bring two young boys that they're the same age. V'chazu Eicha Damascus Yamas, and come see like where the sea meets the land and makes it dry. It was uncultivated property. Shakut Tzivi Chadasi, take the new wood, Vafiku Nura Mimara Chadata, and make a fire from a new hoe. Vaskuani L'Shem Shemayim, bring it up for heaven. Amar Abai. So Abai says, come on. Who is this like? This is like Rebbe Lazar ben Shamua, similar to Ethan's father's name, which was Shammai. This is Shamua. It's the same name. He says, and we know that Rebbe Lazar was a Shamuti, that he was from Shammai. So he says, the Tanya, like we learned, Rebbe Lazar ben Shamua said, just like when you bring the altar, the wood for the altar has to be something that was never used for any other purposes. And just like the altar has to be made from stones that were never used. Also, the wood can never have been used by a regular person. And so the Gemara says, but then Rebbe Lezer ben Shmuel says that we don't require new wood by the Bama. The time didn't we learn? One verse says, Katu v'echad omer, v'yitain David l'arnon b'makom sheklei zav mishkal sheish meos. That he says, so we have this contradiction between one verse in Divrei Hayam and one verse in Shmuel. How much did David pay after there was a plague? Because David counted that he was told to go and bring a carbon, and he bought the area from Arnon, or sometimes it's called Arvana. So David gave to Arnon 600 gold pieces. David, it's like Goran Vesabakar, Bekasav Shkalim Chamishim. Another verse in Shmuel, it says he bought it for 50. Okay, so how do we deal with this? So the Gemara gives three answers. One, Makom is Beach B'Chamishim, Mekol Bayis B'Sheish. Maybe the place of the altar was 50, but the whole area was 600. Or Rabbi Omer Shem Abba Yossi ben Nistai, Gava Mikol Sheva Chamishim Shein Sheish Mil. Maybe it means he collected 50 from every tribe, which made a total of 600. And Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel says, Vayikin David as a Goran can Mefarish Binyan. That's literal. Vayitin David La'arnam b'malkam shikol zav mishkal sheish meos. He gave him 600. Avol abakar wa'olav ha'morigim u'klei bakar wa'etzim b'kesef shkam chamishim. But the utensils that were accompanying it, that was what was 50. So we see it wasn't new wood. Vayomer Avan David Yikach v'yao Adoni HaMelech hatov beinav re'eh bakar wa'olav ha'morigim u'klei bakar wa'etzim. So you're going to use the morigim and the utensils accompanying the cattle for the wood. So you see, it doesn't require the new wood. So how can we say that Rabbi Elazar and Shmuel requires a new wood? So the Gemara says, no, there too. Rav Amar. So the Gemara says, Rav Amar, Rav will tell you, Hasam Nami Chadati. There, it was new wood. It was new utensils. They were never used. My morigim. What are these morigim? Amar Ula Mita Shel Turbo. It was a bed of turbo. My Mita Shel Turbo. Amar Abaye Iza de Karakasa. The Daishan Dishai. So this was a piece of wood that was with sharp points in it that they used to use to harvest things, to thresh. Amar Baya Mikra. What's the verse that tells us this? Inei samtich lemorag charutz chadash palpipio. So it's like pointy edges. Makrile Rabbi Levrei v'Ramile Kra Dadi. So Rabbi was teaching his son, and he threw two psukim against each other. It says, "V'yitin David l'Arnon." One pasuk cited, "V'ksiv v'yitin David." So how do we deal with the contradiction? Rabbi was teaching his children, his son. So what a geschmack moment. Rabbi was teaching his son Sefer Shmuel. He says, he collected 50 shkolim from each tribe, which equaled 600. Where it says, Vakati Kashina Adadi, but still a contradiction. Hasam Kesef, Hachazav. One place it's silver, the other place it's gold. So this is what it means. Go Vakesef, B'mishkal Sheish Mil Zav. Collect silver, meaning to say, collect from each tribe amount of silver that's the equivalent of 50 gold shkolim, which together equals 600 pieces of gold. There's obviously a lot of beautiful ideas here in this stuff. There's so much to talk about, but we did it quickly. But we'll do it again at 8:00. Baruch Hashem. Everybody have a beautiful day.